Hello, beautiful humans. How are you this evening? I am so glad to see so many of you here. I am live in Phoenix, Arizona. It is Tuesday, April 15th, tax day, which thank goodness I took care of that so I didn't have to worry about it because I was having secondhand anxiety for everybody who's got to do their taxes here in the United States. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you're here. Good to see you. It has been a wild day in the courtroom. I am covering the trial of my cousin, Lori Vallow Daybell. Now she goes by Lori Daybell. I'm there in the courtroom. I've been taking very detailed notes about everything that's going on. And I do want to address as well, at the end of my recap, I will address some of the comments that my cousin Adam made on his show the other night, just briefly. I want to say that I promised you guys a video. I wrote the entire thing. I recorded the entire thing. I edited the entire thing. And then I decided, you know what? I just want to touch on it and be done with it. I don't want to think about it or talk about it anymore. So I'm going to give you the recap. So this morning, I went through a full recap. We started out the day with Detective Yin Clan, I think is how you say it, on the stand. And we started out with a bunch of motions that we had to review from the state. And then we were able to have the cross-examination of Detective Yin Clan resume from the previous day. Lori had been talking to her about the turning over of Charles Vallow's cell phone to the people who were going to put it into evidence. So that's what we started out with this morning. That went on for quite a long time. There were lots of sidebars, lots of objections, a few jury questions at the end of that testimony. And then, the redirect, I think that Prosecutor Trina Kay did a great job of just bringing it back home and wrapping up everything that Detective Yin Clan said about Lori's behavior that day and about the timeline of events and everything. Now, this is what I was looking the most forward to, I think, in this trial, other than the case agent who's going to testify tomorrow. Ariel Werther, who is the forensic computer, cell phone, and GPS data expert. He presented to us a slideshow of all of the different locations that all of the different cell phone devices were showing on the day of Charles Vallow's death. And he did have an excellent voice. I really loved listening to him. He did a great job. He was very, very detailed. Now, I'm going to go through this with you in detail, but this is going to be kind of a short recap because he was the only witness that was there after lunch. And then we got all the way through cross-examination and redirect. There were no questions from the jury. And then we ended the day early because Detective Duncan was going to be the next witness called. He was there in the courtroom this morning, sitting at the prosecutor's table. And then he apparently fell ill. He was feeling worse and worse throughout the morning. And then the prosecutor said, you know what? I want you to be your best when you're testifying. Go home, rest up, and hopefully he'll be back tomorrow. Now, for those of you keeping track, if you've watched the list of witnesses that the prosecution has, that means the only testimony that's left is Detective Duncan. And then Detective Moffitt is on the list, but I don't believe that Trina Kay is going to call him as a witness. So it's very possible that tomorrow we could finish up with the state's case in chief. So that puts a spin on the timeline, because what we found out this morning also is that Lori she hasn't really subpoenaed anyone who has anything material to add to the case. So we know that she sent out a couple of subpoenas to two detectives, and those subpoenas were for the wrong date, for them to show up in court on the wrong day. And then we know that she also sent out a subpoena to Bobby Vallow, who's Charles Vallow's brother. She yesterday apologized for that, said it was a clerical error. And then it happened again where she subpoenaed Larry Woodcock. Now, she is not supposed to be able to subpoena any of the protected victims in this case. And certainly Larry Woodcock falls into that category, as does Bobby Vallow. She was not supposed to be able to do that. Dee Dee, thank you so much for the super sticker for chicken nuggets and 2 bottles of water. I really appreciate that for my high adrenaline day. Thank you so much, because we all know that adrenaline makes you really, really thirsty, as Lori taught us earlier. So the judge, as I mentioned this in my morning recap, the judge was very harsh with Lori about sending subpoenas to protected victims without going through the prosecutor's office. And I don't know if you guys subscribe to this or not, but I personally do not believe that that was an accident at all. I don't believe that it was a clerical error. I believe that Lori did that on purpose. And there's nothing that Larry Woodcock could have to offer materially, evidence-wise in this case. I think it was just, somebody said, Soap and Clay said, vindictive. Yes, I think that's absolutely vindictive. I don't think it's an accident at all. But so far, all we have is 2 subpoenas from 2 detectives. And those detectives, as far as I know, have not been interviewed by the state. And that's kind of the rule, is that they need a subpoena. They have to be interviewed by the state first to see if they have anything relevant to add to the case. And then they can be called as a witness. So Lori is in a little bit of trouble now, because she doesn't actually have anyone to testify on her behalf. We heard earlier today, they went through her witness list, and the state was filing a motion to preclude some of her witnesses, and the rest had not yet been subpoenaed. We don't even know if Barry Cox has replied to the subpoena. We don't even know if Barry Cox has been interviewed. Well, he hasn't been interviewed by the state, but we don't know if he has responded to any of that. And even if he did, we don't know that he has anything to add to the case. So knowing that the state is going to finish their case in chief probably by tomorrow, their last witness, Detective Duncan, he's the case agent. He's the one that is going to bring this all together. He's going to take us through all of the evidence in a timeline fashion. He's going to tell that story and that narrative that we've all been waiting for, to line out all of the evidence that has come out that proves that Lori Daybell conspired to murder Charles Vallow. At the end of that testimony, if the case in chief is finished with the state, they're going to turn it over to Lori to give her case. And here's my prediction, okay? This is just speculation on my part. I don't believe that Lori wants to get on the stand and testify, because if she does, then her prior convictions can come into evidence. She can basically be called out and say, have you been convicted in any prior cases? They can't say the name of the charges, but they give the case number and they give the date of the crime that was committed. So basically, it would be this narrative of, okay, so Charles was shot on July 11th, and then you were convicted of another crime that happened on or about September 9th. Then you were convicted of another crime that happened on or about September 23rd. Then in November, you were married. So that timeline doesn't look good for Lori, and I think she doesn't want to get on the stand. That's just my personal opinion. I know that in Idaho, her defense team did not present any kind of a defense. They just said the state did not make their burden. We're going to go ahead and send it to the jury. I think it's likely that might happen here as well. So it's anybody's guess as to when closing statements might happen, as to whether or not Lori's going to call witnesses, as to whether or not that she's going to get on the stand. All of that is up in the air. This is just my speculation about it. And so we don't know, but it could be very possible that we could be concluding this trial pretty soon. So for me, it's a little, I don't know, it's a little bittersweet. I cannot wait to get home. I do not like being here. I do not like being in court, just because it's stressful. I much preferred the experience of watching Lori's first trial from the comfort of my own home, where I could turn it off when I wanted to and just go over it from time to time. And now, just being here in person and also doing these recaps twice a day, it's been a lot. It's pretty draining. So I can't wait to go home. By the same token, I had always planned to not be in court this coming week because my daughter's getting married a week from Sunday, and my other daughter is expecting a baby a couple of days later. And so I'm going to be involved in family things. And so, regardless of what happens with the timing of this case, I'm not going to be back in Arizona next week. I was really encouraged to hear that if Lori is found guilty in this case, they're not going to do a sentencing yet. They're going to wait until the Brandon Boudreaux case is over, and then they will sentence her at the end of that case. So whether she's found guilty or not guilty in this case and in that case, the sentencing won't happen until after that case is over. And it's right now scheduled to start in the beginning of June. However, if this case finishes that much earlier, I don't know if they'll move the timeline up or not, but I would think that probably they would try to. So I definitely want to be back here for the sentencing. If the case does drag out a little longer, if Lori is allowed to call witnesses and have her expert come in, which is doubtful at this point, and it drags out a little longer and I'm able to, I would like to be here for the verdict. But there again, my family is way more important. My kids are way more important than this. So that's just to kind of tell you where we're at timeline wise. I think I don't think anybody expected that we were going to get through all of this as quickly as we have. And I know that they sort of padded the timeline a little bit, allowing for a pro se defendant or pro per defendant, knowing that sometimes it takes a little longer because there are lots of objections. There are lots of sidebars. The cross-examination might be longer. But so far, what Lori's done on cross-examination is just kind of restate all of the questions that the state asked in the first place. So, hey, Tony Hoban, so good to see you. Love that you're here. And hi, Tim. Good to see you too. So let me go ahead and recap what happened in the afternoon. And yes, for those of you saying, grandbabies, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I am 1 year younger than Lori. Lori is about 51. I think she turns 52 in June, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm 50. And Summer is a year younger than me. So, Lori, Summer, and I were all right there in the same age bracket. So let's go to what happened this afternoon. I'm on the wrong page of my notes. So before lunch, Ariel Werther told us his qualifications, basically set up what he did to prepare to give this PowerPoint presentation. He went through a lot of the relevant information to tell us how he got to these conclusions. And so it was after lunch that we were finally able to see this PowerPoint. And I'm super grateful for this because I'm a visual person and those things stick with me more than anything else does. It really helps me to understand the entire case. And so he starts out the PowerPoint by listing the 3 cell phones that we're going to track in this PowerPoint. We have Lori Vallow's Verizon number and Lori Vallow's T-Mobile number. And then we also have Alex Cox's phone number. Then we also have, although they didn't post the actual phone number, but we do have a separate designator for Charles Vallow's phone, because what we've learned at this point is that Lori took Charles's phone with her when she left the Four Peaks address that morning after Charles had been shot. So the data expert here, Ariel Werther, is going to detail for us where Charles Vallow's phone was in relation to Lori's phone and Alex's phone, and what was happening on all of those devices the entire day of the incident. So the July 11th, the whole July 11th day. So basically, we're going to start out, first of all, first thing in the morning at 7:16 a.m., Charles Vallow's cell phone was located at the Hilton that he stayed at the night before. At 7:31 a.m., his cell phone shows up at the Four Peaks address. And it was really fascinating, this PowerPoint that he put together, where he could click on the slide and it would show us the map, and then it would show us the pings going down the different roads and as it traveled, the location as it traveled throughout time. And it was really cool to see that technology and to be able to see in real time, where the phone was traveling to. So at 7:31, Charles Vallow's phone shows up at the Four Peaks residence. At 7:37 is when Charles Vallow receives that final text message from Adam. And we know he did not read that text message yet. Later, we've already seen in evidence that text message gets read sometime around 12:30 in the afternoon. So at this time, 7:37, he receives that last text message. And then at 7:50, his phone leaves the Four Peaks residence. So basically, for 19 minutes, Charles's cell phone was at the Four Peaks residence. So I've heard and seen a lot of speculation and done a lot of speculation myself about what actually happened inside that residence. And unfortunately, we're probably never going to know the full truth of how it happened. I've heard so many theories, everything from he was ambushed, the kids were in the house, to Lori fired the second shot, to Lori was never at the house when the shot happened. She never heard or saw anything. I've heard speculations that the bat was just a plant. Tylee never used it. I've heard so many different versions of what might happen. And unfortunately, I just don't think that we're ever going to know. And for me, this is one of the reasons why I withdrew totally from the media coverage of the case from the time that the children were found until Lori's first trial, because all I could see in the media was all of this speculation about what might have happened. And we didn't really have any facts or evidence at that point. And so to me, the speculation was just keeping me stuck in this cycle of grief all the time. And hearing the evidence in the trials is actually what ended up grounding me and helping me to grieve and move on. So for me, the process of attending the trial and digging into the evidence and knowing the facts and the details of the case has been what has helped me to grieve and to move on. Unfortunately, this is one piece of the puzzle that I don't think we're ever going to know. But I would be really curious to ask if it's possible. I would love to talk with the case agent, Detective Duncan. I would love to talk with the prosecutor, Trina Kay, and see, what evidence did they maybe not bring into trial that might help shed some light on what actually happened inside the house that day. Not to broadcast, on my channel, or not to tell anybody in a public forum, but just for my own personal satisfaction, to really just, understand what the most likely scenario is that happened. I think some of the evidence has borne out a good scenario, but I don't think we have really enough to piece together what happened inside the house and whether or not, Lori was actually there. That was one of the other things that, from Detective Yin Clan's testimony, was that Lori kept focusing on hearing the shot, one shot. So I don't think that she was there when that second shot was fired. And if you go, I was just on Vinnie Politan's show a little bit earlier. Mike King from Profiling Evil was on there. And we did speculate about this, whether or not Lori was there for that second shot. And, I still don't feel like I've had a conclusion to that. I don't think that question has been answered for me so far. Elva Lopez, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate it. That's going to go into the snack fund because I'm going to need some snacks if I'm going to get through the rest of this. So basically where we are right now is that Charles's cell phone leaves the Four Peaks residence at 7:50. We know that Lori had that cell phone with her. Then at 7:52, 2 minutes after Lori leaves the house, Alex Cox calls Lori Vallow. Now, I was trying to look at the screen as best I could because I really wanted to know how long that phone call was. I wanted to know, was this a planning situation? Did they have time to really talk about what Alex should be doing during this time? Knowing that Tylee's in the car, she can overhear at least what Lori is saying in that conversation. I was curious to know about the timing, but I just couldn't catch it on there. And I don't know if it was even posted or not. So 7:52, Alex calls Lori on Lori's T-Mobile number. This is also important because when Lori is with Detective Yin Clan, she gives her Verizon number as a contact number. But the phone that she's communicating primarily with Alex is her T-Mobile number. So she's got two phones to juggle. And we also know from the Idaho trial that she was contacting or communicating with Chad Daybell at this time as well, most likely on her T-Mobile number, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that the Verizon number was the one that Charles Vallow was paying for. So I believe her second phone was her Chad phone, basically. And so they have a phone call at 7:52, and then from 7:52 to 7:56, we see the cell phone moving towards the Burger King location. They showed two different videos from the security cameras from Burger King where Lori arrives in the drive-thru at about 7:54, and then she leaves the drive-thru right about 7:56. And I just got to give props to Burger King. They've got a 2-minute, delivery time on their fast food order. That was pretty good. Lori didn't have to wait at all. Of course, I didn't see anybody else in the drive-thru in front of her, and it's morning. So anyway, I have to throw in these little lighthearted moments because if I don't, I just get too upset. So we see then that the cell phone, Charles's cell phone, leaves north from the Burger King. And then at 8:06, Alex Cox calls Lori Vallow's T-Mobile again. And again, we don't know how long that phone call is. But at 8:06, from 8:06 to 8:08, we see them stop at a Walgreens. The Charles Vallow's phone stops at a Walgreens. And I don't know if they were closed or what the deal was, but Lori leaves that Walgreens almost immediately. She's only there for 2 minutes, and then she goes to another Walgreens that is a little farther away. And so from 8:08 to 8:17, Charles's cell phone is at that Walgreens. Now, we saw the video from the Walgreens. We can see her coming into the Walgreens. Lots of people have pointed out in that video, you can see her actually wearing some shoes. So the idea that Lori left the house without her shoes is not true. I think Tylee did not have shoes. We see Lori purchase 2 pairs of flip-flops. And while she's there at the cashier, she's chatting away with the cashier. You can see her very animated. This is the first time I've seen this video. And the cashier is helping her snip off the tags of the flip-flops so that she can use them right away. And you can only imagine that Lori is spinning some kind of a tale for this cashier about what has happened and why she has left the house without shoes. Well, she's wearing shoes, but I think Tylee didn't have them. Later on, in the video where they come back to the Four Peaks residence, one of my beautiful channel members who's over on the Patreon chat, we have a Lori Vallow Daybell trial chat over there on my Patreon. It's free for all of the even free subscribers over there. One of my wonderful subscribers over there did a little zoom in on them arriving back at Four Peaks, and you can see Lori and Tylee wearing flip-flops. Tylee's wearing the green ones. So at the Walgreens, Lori bought a black pair and a green pair. And you can see when they arrive back at the Four Peaks residence that Tylee has the green pair on. Now, I don't know if Lori ditched those other shoes that she was wearing and put the flip-flops back on so that when she arrived there, she could reasonably say, I ran out to get those flip-flops because I didn't have any shoes on. And so anyway, that's all about the flip-flops. So they were at the Walgreens until 8:17 in the morning. And then at 8:20, that transaction is complete. At 8:33, we see Charles Vallow's cell phone arrive at Lauren's Life Academy, which is where JJ was going to school. And then from 8:36 to 8:35, the cell phone is traveling back towards the Four Peaks address. At 8:35 is when Alex Cox finally called 911. Now, when the cell phone left the Four Peaks residence, it was 7:50. Lori testified, or she told her detective in the witness statement that she gave, that she heard the shot, one shot. And that Charles Vallow's cell phone then left the Four Peaks residence at 7:50. If Lori was being somewhat truthful about the fact that the shot happened and then she immediately left, that would have been around 7:50. Alex Cox did not call 911 until 8:35. That call was picked up at 911 by 8:36. That means that it was 45 minutes from the time that the cell phone left the cell phone left the Four Peaks residence until Alex Cox called the police. It's anyone's guess what he was doing during that time. My guess is that he was sort of cleaning and staging the crime scene to make it look like it would fit this narrative that there was a bat and that there was an altercation and that, they scuffled or whatever. I don't know. I can't tell you. I have no idea whether or not there was actually an altercation. I have no idea whether or not the bat was actually involved or if it was just planted. We know there were no fingerprints on it, but Tylee says in her interview that she sort of stuck the bat out at Charles and that Charles grabbed it from the end. Well, if that was the case, probably there would have been clearly some fingerprints on that bat, on the end of the bat. And we know the fingerprint expert testified that there were no conclusive or inconclusive prints on there. There were two partials and they couldn't be identified and they also couldn't be ruled out. So there's that possibility. Now, I mentioned this on my recap the other day when we finally saw the crime scene photos and we saw the floor plan of the house. It made so much more sense to me having seen the floor plan, listening to Lori and Tylee talk about this running around the counter and all of that kind of stuff. So I was able to sort of get a little bit of a better picture of what they were saying the story was. However, they were different enough. The stories between Alex, Lori, and Tylee were different enough that, in my opinion, it really warranted some more questioning at the very least. So I do think that the fact that they said they didn't need to test Lori for gunshot residue because Alex said he fired the shot. They just assumed that was the case. They didn't really, from what I understand, they didn't spray with luminol to try and find blood anywhere. It's odd to me that they wouldn't have found at least some blood spatter from the first shot that went off. I just have so many questions that I don't know what I don't know and how investigations are conducted and who decides what evidence to collect and swab and all those kinds of things. The main question that I will continue to always have is why they didn't at least just hold Alex for a little while longer, because he did have that prior conviction and it was a violent offense. And even though he got his gun rights restored, I just don't understand why they didn't hold him for at least 24 hours. Just based on the fact that he had a prior conviction. So anyway, that's just my speculation and all of that. I can't really, I just don't have any peace of mind about all of this because there's going to be unanswered questions. So there we are with Alex Cox finally calling 911 at 8:35. The phone call connects at 8:36. At 8:49, Charles Vallow's cell phone returns to the Four Peaks residence. So that is when Lori arrives. Just a little over 10 minutes after Alex Cox makes the 911 call. We know that police was already there, fire was already there, and we know that some of the detectives saw her arrive. Then at 10:26 a.m., Alex's cell phone was at the Chandler Police Department with Officer Krautheim. And he went there to be interviewed. And then at 12:13 to 12:36, Charles Vallow's phone and Lori's T-Mobile phone travel northeast and go to Santan, where Alex lives. Then from 12:36 to 1:42, Charles Vallow's phone, Lori's T-Mobile phone, and Alex Cox's phone are at the Sherry Street residence, which is Alex's home. Those 3 devices remain at that location until 2:43 p.m. So that's approximately 2 hours that Lori and Alex were at his residence with Charles's cell phone. Plenty of time to erase texts, erase pictures, plenty of time for Alex. We heard Trina Kay reference this in her opening statement. Plenty of time for Alex to take pictures of the cell phone and send them to himself and send them to Lori. So that's what I'm looking forward to hearing about tomorrow, is what happened there. So there's also a couple of other notable things that happen at the residence while they're there. At 2:07, Lori Vallow's Verizon phone calls Detective Yinclan's desk, because we know the detective was trying to get in touch with either Lori or Alex to come back to the scene and do a walkthrough. Then at 2:18, knowing that the police want them to come back to the scene, they're just stalling here or whatever, because at 2:18, Lori Vallow's Verizon phone calls Valley of the Sun Mortuary. Literally at this time, I don't think Charles Vallow's body has even been removed from the home, and she's calling the mortuary. We know also Chad Daybell called the mortuary a little later that day. He was super creative and came up with the alias of Chad Daybell, Dabal, which is so far away from his real name, nobody would ever know that that was him. Sorry, just a bit of snark. So then finally, at 2:43, Charles Vallow's phone arrives back at the Four Peaks residence. And we know that at 3:11 is when that cell phone was turned over to Detective Yinclan. So yes, Irish Jen, we heard today that Chad's call was a different call. Lori called at one point during the day, and I would love to hear that phone recording. I would love to hear it if we have it. And then Chad called later in the day, I believe. I don't know the exact time of Chad's call, but we know now that they were 2 separate calls, because the first call, or the Chad call that came out in the previous trial, we know that Chad made that from his own cell phone, and he was not in Arizona at the time that this happened. And so now we have proof that Lori Daybell called the Valley of the Sun Mortuary. They did not play either of those calls today. Not in court. So it'll be interesting to see what else they bring in as far as the calls and the texts and all of the other data, what Detective Duncan is able to testify to. That's going to be interesting to see. So at this point, this data expert, Ariel Werther, says, at the end of my investigation, I came to the inescapable conclusion that either the shooting didn't happen that close to the time that the 911 call was made, or Lori Vallow was not there at the time of the shooting. That's a pretty concise conclusion. So, cross-examination. Are you ready for this? The first question, on 12/26/2019 is when the report was submitted. And Lori sort of starts to testify, and she says, the report you submitted is very different from what we saw today or what we heard today. And Lori says, do you remember noting that the morning of July 11th, that Charles sent his daily text message of love and devotion to Lori? And he says, no, I don't really recall that. And then she says, do you recall seeing the interactions of women that Charles was trying to date? And he said, yes, I do. I do remember that. Sorry, just got distracted by a text message from a kiddo. Okay, we're all good. So then Lori starts to talk about these text messages from people that Charles was trying to date. She talks about, do you remember seeing information from Florence Hughes that he had an appointment to pick up Florence Hughes at the airport and she never arrived? And here there's an objection as to relevance. And Lori says it is relevant. And Judge Bresky says, well, how? How is it relevant? And she says, these are the events on the day in June and early July. And it's relative to what was happening that day. So he says, go on to your next question. And she says, did you learn who Florence Hughes was? Objection. Lori Vallow is clearly trying to smear the character of the victim here. And I don't know if you guys know who Florence Hughes is, but this was the first time hearing the name Florence Hughes, but I know who that is. This was somebody that Charles, I'm so sorry. This is the person that Charles was texting with. And we know that Charles sent this person money. And then apparently there was a plan for Florence Hughes to come into town, but never arrived at the airport. And then I think that Charles realized that he was being catfished. So that's the reason Lori wanted to bring that in. It was nothing but pure snark, nothing but wanting to malign the character of the victim. And I was grateful for Trina Kay speaking up and making sure this didn't get in. So then Detective Werther says that the relevant info that he gets from the download of the cell phone goes to the case agent, and it's not always obvious what information is relevant. And so sometimes they just have to point things out and hope that it's what the case agent is looking for. And if they're looking for anything additional, they'll come back and ask about it. So then on the 10th of July, he had a scheduled phone date with Nancy Jo Hanks. And then on the 11th of July, a date with Michelle Gilbert. And so this is when Trina Kay jumps in and says, let's put a stop to this. And it does end. So then Lori wants to talk about the hotel room. She says, you recovered a laptop, an iPad, a rolling briefcase. And he said, yes, I was there with Detective Moffat. And he said he took the items to the impound rather than going through them and then repacking them and then taking them down. He says that he did not check the laptop or alter the devices in any way. He did document and number the evidence. And Lori asked if there was anything left in the room. And he said no. Then she said, did you realize that Charles Vallow had a $2 million life insurance policy on me? And he said, no, I wasn't aware. And Lori's always upset when someone's not aware of a fact that's important to her. Then she said, did you see evidence of the threatening texts on Charles Vallow's cell phone? He said, I didn't see the texts or any of the contents of the phone. He was just focused on the GPS data. Then she says, the detective says that he went back to the residence basically to shadow and observe the investigation and how these things play out. And he was there when the medical examiner arrived, and he was there when Alex Cox returned with Detective Coons. Then Detective Werther called Lori Vallow on the 12th to find out where JJ was going to school and to get the hotel card key. And then he went to the hotel immediately after getting the card key from Lori. And then the analysis that he did was restricted to just that day. He was not going to look at any of the other things that were going on the phone. Lori wanted to know how long it took to compile. And then she said, it's 8 pages of data. Does that sound correct? And he said, no. She said, so it's 8 pages of data. And he said, is that a question? And she just paused for a long time. And then under her breath, she said, or maybe it was even longer. It's like she's kind of talking to herself up there. It was very bizarre. Then she asked him if he went to Lawrence Life Academy. No, he didn't. And then did he identify JJ in the video that we saw at the Burger King? And he said, no, I didn't identify JJ. I just noted that it was a minor with short, dark hair. And I don't understand why she's asking these questions. But then she says, that's all I have, Your Honor, in her little baby voice. Then on redirect, Trina K comes back and the witness testified, I was provided with data from the laptop that I didn't use in the PowerPoint that he presented today. And Trina asked why only the day of, and he said the timelines that we were told, we were told that the timelines were inaccurate. And so we were using data to either corroborate or refute the timeline that we were presented with. And the devices clearly departed prior to the 911 call. And so then he reiterated that definite, very concise statement that he came to the inescapable conclusion that either the timeline didn't happen, the shooting didn't happen as close to the 911 call as they were told, or Lori Vallow was not there for the shooting. And that concluded. Now, Wednesday and Thursday of this week, we're going to have court from 10:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And we expect again tomorrow that Detective Duncan is going to testify tomorrow. He's the case agent. This is what we're hoping, is that he's going to wrap everything together in a really concise package for the jury to be able to know exactly what happened in a narrative format so that they can put all of this evidence together and get something that is a little bit more easy to understand. And so I went back and listened to Chad's mortuary phone call. I didn't know if I could tell the timeline, and I didn't know exactly. So now I just really want to very briefly address sort of some of the things that happened over the weekend. My cousin Adam testified in court on Thursday. It was a really tough day for me, and maybe I'll talk about why in a little bit. But first, I just want to address head on what happened. So Adam was recapping his day in court and his testimony. I was very complimentary of his testimony, as most of you saw in my recap that night. And hey, Tom's wife, Susan, I will be there very soon. I'm almost done. And I just got Tom's text, so I will text back in just a few minutes. So Adam got on the podcast and he was answering questions that Rex was putting up on the screen. And one might question, why even put up a question about Megan if it's not going to have a good outcome? But one of the first questions was whether or not he saw me at court and whether we talked. And he said, I don't really talk to Megan. We disagree on a bunch of things, so it's kind of pointless for us to have a conversation. And then the next question that came up about me was a little later on, and it said, something about me living with him in Austin. And Adam said, Megan lived with us for like a week, and then her parents came and picked her up. Well, that's not exactly how it happened. I did have a job while I was there. I was there long enough to get 3 or 4 paychecks from that job. And then, as I've stated before, Janice flew into Austin to make sure that I left the apartment. They dropped me off at the bus station, and I went to San Antonio. Adam was working at the time that all of that went down, so I don't blame him at all for not remembering that. But then the next question that came up, Adam had some unfortunate comments to make. He said, when Megan talks, about 99% of what she says is not true. So you have to be careful when you listen to Megan. Now, I know that Adam disagrees with me fundamentally on our involvement with the LDS Church. So I'm going to give some leeway to say that maybe that's what he's talking about. I have a specific stance that I don't believe the truth claims of the church are true, and he does. And so maybe that's the lie that he's talking about. So I texted him and I asked him to please clarify, specify, please be specific about any lies that I may have told, and he was not able to say anything specific, but basically called out, why are you even here? This has nothing to do with you. And, it's none of your business is basically what he told me. So all I want to say is, and this is what Rex and I have said this from sort of the beginning, is that we have different perspectives, we have different experiences, and each of us are entitled to our opinions about those experiences. Each of us are entitled to disagree with other family members who have different perspectives and different experiences. But I will say, I believe probably that Adam and definitely Summer and possibly even Colby believe some things about me that are not true. There is a family member who likes to defame me any chance that they get. And I think I understand the reason why they're doing that, but I don't pay it any credence because that person is not out here in the public eye. And as Brene Brown famously said, if you are not in the arena getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback. So all I'm going to say is that I leave room for my other family members to have their own experiences and to disagree with me about my experiences. I know lots of the family members don't like me talking about the family. But I think the reason for that is because the family system is still a place of fear and guilt and shame and secrecy. And that's the reason why I'm not really in there engaging with those family members anymore. I have done a lot of work to get myself to a healthier, happier, more healed place. And I'm not going to jump back in to the family dynamic and be involved with all of that. So I'm just going to let that lay the way that it is. And the people who know me and who listen to me understand who I am and why I'm here. You've heard me talk about my experiences, and you've heard me talk about the reason that I'm here, which is for healing, which is for helping to call out on unhealthy and harmful behaviors so that this doesn't happen to other families. And that's my motivation. And the people who know me and listen to me know that, and they believe that. The people who would agree with Adam that I'm lying about 99% of the things that I say, they're welcome to go to a different channel. My channel is about health and healing, and that's where I want to keep it. I want to clarify that I don't know for sure if Colby was talking about me on his channel or not. He did mention a cousin thing. And if he was, I just want to say he has every right to be angry about this situation. Somebody very wise taught me this concept of concentric circles when a family member of theirs was suffering from cancer. And they said the person who is suffering is at the center of that circle. Nobody should go to that person and tell them how much they're grieving over this illness. The next circle out is their immediate family and friends. And nobody should come to them and tell them how much they're grieving about their family member being sick. So I'm thinking about this in the same way. At the center of the circle in this situation, it's Kay, it's Larry, it's Colby, it's Charles's other sons, it's Charles's brothers and sister. Those are the immediate people in that inner circle. And I've never claimed to be there. I'm definitely on the probably maybe the third circle out from this. So I've never claimed to be important in this situation. I'm just a person who is out here grieving the loss of my family and the loss of Lori and my relationship with Lori and the Lori that I remember and the family that I thought that I had, when really it basically has come out in this exact trial that what I thought was, what I suspected all along was confirmed when Adam gave his testimony, that the day that Charles died, that at the very least, Janice and Barry and Summer were all Team Lori. They all believed, well, Janice said that Alex was a hero that day. And to have it confirmed was pretty devastating for me. And that's one of the reasons why Thursday was so difficult for me. All I just want to say is that those of us who are out here in the public space talking about our experiences, we're going to differ from each other. And I'm still going to offer kindness and respect to Adam and Rex, even if they don't offer it to me. And I'm always going to offer kindness and respect and love to Colby. He has lost more than anybody else in this case. And if my involvement has hurt him in any way, I hate that for him. That's not my point. My point is not to add pain and suffering to him by talking about my experiences. And so that's all I'm going to say about that. And I just hope that those of you who have space to give some grace and kindness to all the people who are involved in this, I really appreciate it. And if you're one of those that this situation makes you angry and you feel like venting about it, please don't do it in my comments section. You can do it anywhere else that you want to. But I just would really appreciate if we keep this space a kind and respectful, beautiful human space where we can support each other through all the things that we've gone through. So Thank you so much for being here. I hope that you'll take a second to like and subscribe. If you're able to support the channel financially, I have a Patreon and a Venmo. I would love for you to visit over there. And I love seeing you, beautiful humans. Thank you for being here with me to help me unpack some of this on my own. And I hope you have a beautiful night. And I will see you again tomorrow for lunchtime recap. And I hope that you will take care of yourselves. See you soon. Hello, beautiful human. Thank you so much for watching today. Would you do me one quick favor and take a second to subscribe to the channel? It's the best way that you can support the channel for free. In addition, if you're interested in even more exclusive content, you can join the community at the link below. Thanks so much for being here.